Hey, my name is Jonathan Helm, and in this video, I'll show you how to compute some measures of variability in R. So I just finished up a little bit on central tendency. I showed how to calculate means and medians. So I'm just going to continue on from the same video and talk about some different forms of variability. So I read in the last video, I read in the salary data set, so everything that I'm working with is that data set. I'm not going to read it in a second time because I've done it in about, I don't know, 5 or 6 other videos, so hopefully that will be enough reference for the other videos too. So I'm just going to take a look at the top of my data set. So I have all the variables here, ID, salary, number of publications, and so on. And let's say that I want to calculate the standard deviation for salary. And one way that I can do that is using the standard deviation function, or just SD, and I'll type data $salary. All right, so if I type that in, and I'm getting the estimated standard deviation of salary, right? So I'm using the standard deviation function, and then inside I say, okay, I want to calculate it on the variable called salary, and that's located in the data set called data, right? And I can just use the $sign operator to call on salary. Sometimes if we have missing data, we need to account for that, right? So if I use the standard deviation function or the SD function for number of pubs, and I run that, I'm going to get back NA. Usually when this happens, it means that R is running into a missing value somewhere in your data set. So if you scroll down through all of these values for number of pubs, at some point you'd see a missing value. So R can't actually calculate the standard deviation because you have missingness in your data. So what you need to do is tell R what to do with that, and we can use the na.rm function to say, hey, like just get rid of any missing values. So what it'll do is it'll extract out the variable number of publications, it'll remove any rows or any observations that are missing, and then it'll calculate the standard deviation on the remaining portion. If I highlight and run that, it says that the standard deviation is about 1 for the number of publications in my data set. Okay, so we can use standard deviation. I think the other most common one is variance, right? So for that we have the var function. So I can use var salary, and that's going to calculate the variance. Right, so this is the variance of salary in my sample. If I want to calculate the variance for number of pubs, it's the same process. The only thing that I need to include is the na.rm function. Sorry, na.rm argument. And also set equal to true, which again is saying if you're running into missing data, just remove it, and then after you removed it, then go ahead and calculate the variance. Right, so the variance on the number of publications is also about 1. Okay. Now, of course, we can drop this into an apply statement. So looking at the top of our data set again, oftentimes you want to calculate standard deviations or variances on more than one variable. So in this example, I might want to calculate standard deviations or variances for salary, number of publications, using the job, or grants. Okay. And so to do that, you can use an apply statement. Right, so apply, it needs a data set, it needs a margin, and it needs a function. Now the data set is just going to be the subset of the data that I want to apply the function to, right? So I want to apply the standard deviation function to the salary column, the number of publications column, the years on the job column, and the grants column. So what I can do is I can say data, and then I'm going to subset it, and I'm going to type salary, number of pubs, years on job, and grants. Okay, so X, capital X here is just saying what is the data set that you want to apply a particular function to. Margin is a numeric value. It usually takes on values of 1 or 2. So 1 indicates that we're going to apply that particular function across the rows. Right, so if I wanted to extract out the first row and calculate the standard deviation across those values, and then the second row, standard deviation, third row, standard deviation, that's what margin equals 1 would do. In this case, we have margin equals 2, which is moving across columns, right? So calculate the standard deviation for the first column, the second column, the third column, and so on. So margin equals 2. Fun is function, and the function that we want is SD, right? This is our standard deviation. This is the function that we were using up here. Notice that we don't include parentheses, right? We don't need that in the apply function. R is just using this to call on the specific function that we want. I'm going to add one more. This is the na.rm is equal to true. Okay, and that indicates that when you're applying the SD function to include this option, to include this argument, that na.rm equals true. That way when we move through those columns and we're calculating standard deviations for each one, if I do run into missingness, I won't get an na back for that given column. Instead, it'll remove those missing values and then calculate the standard deviation. So if I highlight and run this, and I take a look at the output, right, now we're getting standard deviations for each of my columns, right? So this is the standard deviation for salary, this is the standard deviation for number of publications, for years on the job, and for grants. Okay. And of course, I can take this same apply statement, I'm going to copy it and paste it. Let's say instead of calculating standard deviations, instead I wanted to calculate variances, then everything is the same. I'm just going to type var here for variances instead of the SD for the SD function. So I have my var there, I'm going to highlight and run this, okay, and now R is giving back variances instead of standard deviations. Okay, thanks for watching. If you liked the video, then please like it. If you haven't subscribed to my channel yet, then please also subscribe. If you have any comments or questions, feel free to leave them in the comments below, or you can email me directly at jonathanleehelm@gmail.com. You can also follow me on Twitter at jonathanleehelm. And yeah, I hope you enjoyed the video. I hope these are super useful for you. And if you have any comments or feedback, I'd really love to hear from you. Thanks so much for watching.